around the world has condemned the violence in Tibet. In another effort to stop the unrest, the Dalai Lama threatened to step down as head of the Tibetan government in exile if the violence gets any worse. His announcement followed accusations by China's Prime Minister Wen Jiabao that the Dalai Lama incited the clashes in order to undermine the Beijing Olympics, a claim the spiritual leader strongly denied. The BBC's Damien Grammaticus reports from Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama is living in exile.
Today, in new pictures from Chinese television, the Tibetan capital Lhasa looks to be a city returning to a kind of calm. Children back at school. The Tibetans in exile said the security clampdown was continuing. In the past 24 hours, arrests had been going on and former political prisoners were again being rounded up. These were the scenes in Lhasa last Friday, footage obtained by the BBC, showing the violent protests by Tibetans. Shops and buildings were set on fire. And here, Tibetans are believed to be attacking an ethnic Chinese man. One of the Tibetans is armed with a bayonet. And from Beijing has come the first reaction from China's top leadership. Speaking at the closing session of China's parliament, the Premier Wen Jiabao said the protests were an attempt by Tibet's exiled leaders to sabotage Beijing's staging of the Olympics.
We have ample evidence to prove that this incident was organised, premeditated and masterminded by the Dalai clique.
China's premier said the actions of this man, Tibet's exiled spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, were hypocritical. But today, from his seat in exile in India, he went out of his way to criticise the actions of fellow Tibetans who've resorted to violence.
Don't commit violence.
And he was asked if he would resign if violence in Tibet got out of control. He said he'd been asked the same question 20 years ago during previous demonstrations.
I told, if things become out of control, then my only option is completely resign.
What's clear is the Dalai Lama would only really consider stepping down if his people took up arms against China, something that hasn't begun. So his aides say there's no chance of him stepping down now. There's increasing frustration that his middle way of non-violence is not delivering results. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Dharamsala.
Well, another of the BBC's correspondents, James Reynolds, is in China's Qinghai province on the Tibetan plateau, where security has also been tightened.
It's still very difficult for us to get any communication with people inside Tibet. That's why we're here in Qinghai. This is on the Tibetan plateau, and this is home to a great number of Tibetan people. They also live in the neighboring Gansu and Sichuan provinces. We're hearing a lot of unease, and we're seeing a lot of security presence at the moment. When I was driving through Qinghai earlier today, I saw one Tibetan temple in the distance. There was a car parked outside that temple with what looked to be police officers sitting outside and watching. That's the kind of atmosphere that there is here on the Tibetan plateau tonight.
What's your impression, James, of the word and the direction coming clearly politically from Beijing?
I think the message has been clear very much from the first day. On Friday night, when the protests really started in Lhasa, we had a statement issued by the Xinhua news agency accusing the Dalai Lama, in fact, they don't call him the Dalai Lama, they call him the Dalai clique, of organising a premeditated, masterminded campaign. Those exact same words were used this morning in Beijing, several hundred miles away from me, by China's Premier Wen Jiabao. I think that tells us that China's attitude towards the Dalai Lama was fixed very, very early on in this crisis, and that it continues to treat him as a separatist, as someone who wants to break away from China.
The BBC's James Reynolds on the Tibetan plateau in Greater Tibet. We'll be hearing from the political counsellor at the Chinese embassy in London in a few minutes.